Right now, Tennessee Titans quarterback Will Levis is just average. How much better can he get? I'll tell you on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today I have a special episode for you guys. We are going to go through every single position on the Tennessee Titans roster, look at the top two players at each spot, and talk about what talent level they are compared to the rest of the NFL. I'm going to explain why Will Levis is just average right now, but can get much, much better. Talked about the mixed bag of the trenches for the Titans and the spottiness of the back end of the defense. Before we get into all of it, though, do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Again, this is the end of roster week. Next week is AFC South week. I'm going to have interviews with the other AFC South hosts, do a deep dive into the offseason for all the Titans division rivals, and compare the Tennessee Titans position by position to those rivals in the AFC South to see how they stack up. So make sure that you don't miss that next week. But with that being said, time to dive into these talent levels here. And what I wanted to do was make about 6 different talent levels for the Tennessee, or for the everywhere in the NFL, quite frankly, and kind of look at how I see this stacking up. So we have blue chip players, which are the elite players in the NFL. We have red chip players, which are very, very good players. Then we have green players, which are just good players, just good starters. Then we have yellow players, which are just average level starters in the NFL. You could replace them with somebody else. They don't really bring, they're not bad. They're just average level starters. Then we have white players who are white color players there, which are backup level players, practice squad level players, somewhere in between there. And then we have purple players, which are just young, unproven players. So for an example, J.C. Latham is going to be a purple player, considering the fact that he's a rookie. He could be good, he could be average, could be very good, could be elite. We just simply don't know. And acting like we do know right now, I think would be a bit of a mistake. But with that being said, we are going to start at quarterback. And for me, like I mentioned at the top, Will Levis is just an average player at this moment in time. Like, you can't say anything more. The 9 games of Will Levis that we saw right now, if you ranked Will Levis within quarterbacks, and I talked about this earlier in the week when I gave Will Levis a B grade in my starter grades. Will Levis right now is 16 to 20 or 14 to 22, somewhere in there if you ranked all the quarterbacks. Now, how much better can Will Levis get? I think by the end of the season, we could be looking at Will Levis as a green player, as a good player. And I think by next year, we could be looking at Will Levis as a very good player, a red player. I don't know if we'll ever see Will Levis get to the elite of the elite. I don't know if he'll ever be Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow level. But I don't think the Titans necessarily need him to be. I think if he could just go from an average level player to a good player or a very good player, I think that would be a tremendous success for the Tennessee Titans. Now, you look at Mason Rudolph, to me, it's pretty clear here that he is just a backup. Mason Rudolph is never going to be more than a backup. The practice squad in a couple of years probably, but for right now, I think he's one of the better backups in the NFL, but that's still just a backup level. Nobody is considering Mason Rudolph as a starting level player. So to me, Levis right now, if you're honest, is just average with a ton of room to grow. I think he should be in the good range by Halloween. You know what I mean? But right now we have to be fair. You look at the 2 running backs though, and to me, as I said earlier this week, both of them are good players. They are good players. I think these are very solid running backs. So to me, they're both green level players. Like, they're not elite. Spears or Pollard, neither of them are elite running backs. They're not Christian McCaffrey. They're not a healthy Saquon Barkley. They're not a Nick Chubb. I wouldn't necessarily even be able to say that they're very good. I gave them both A minuses when we did the grades earlier in the week. I think that they're both A minus level players. They are good players. Maybe you would say that's B plus, A minus. There's a thin gap there, but I think they're both good players. And that's what's most important for the Titans is they don't have one player who's very good, one player who's not that good like they had for a lot of years during the Derrick Henry experience. And of course, as we've talked about, having people who both these running backs who are versatile can do the same things, that's very important. So to have two running backs that are both good players, good above average starters, that's critical in today's NFL. This is what I've been wanting for so long. Let's do this running back by committee thing instead of just relying on one person who's, got a specific style. Let's have versatile running backs. So I really love the Spears and Pollard dynamic there. And of course, I've talked about that. But moving to wide receiver. Wide receiver is very fun. And I know that some of you guys disagree with me here, but I think that Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins are red level players. I think they are very good players. I think they're both top 20 wide receivers in the NFL. I said that earlier this week, and I'm sticking to it. I think they are absolutely excellent. Now, they aren't elite. They aren't top 10 wide receivers. They aren't Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and, those level of players, CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown. They aren't those guys. No, they aren't. They aren't. But I think it's clear that both of them, again, are top 20 wide receivers. I think they're both absolutely fantastic. So they are red level players, red chip players, you could call it. That's the proper way to say it. Now, you look at the rest of the wide receiver group, though, and I would say that Tyler Boyd he's kind of on that line of average to good for me. He is a good player. I'm going to go with good. Ultimately, that's what I'm going to choose, that Tyler Boyd is a good player. I think that he's, one of the better slot wide receivers in the NFL. You rank all the wide receivers from best to worst, regardless of position, though. And I think Tyler Boyd is just a good player. He's a little bit better than average. Now, after that, though, is where things get kind of interesting. Now, I threw Kyle Phillips in as the backup slot receiver. You could make that Jaquan Jackson. We can have conversations about Kearis Jackson, other players. But I got Kyle Phillips as the backup slot right now. And if I'm honest with you, I think with him and Treylon Burks, at this stage of the game, they're both backups. They're backup level players. You can't say with absolute certainty that they're above average or that they are even average. They're both below average right now, backup level players. That's what I see with Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips. Could Treylon Burks be more? Could Kyle Phillips be more? Sure. But honestly, you go over to NWI, and I have NWI as the better player. NWI is an average level wide receiver. Like, he is an average player. NWI, I've given him a lot of grief, and it's more just stylistically what he represented with the previous coaching staff. But at this point, NWI has been more productive than both those guys. He's more reliable than both those guys. You can't put Burks and Phillips on the same level as NWI. He deserves to be a little bit higher than that. He's not a good player. He's just an average level player in the NFL. Solid fourth wide receiver, backup style guy, can play on special teams, all of that. He's in the right role now instead of being wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. Now NWI is properly slotted as the backup that he is, and he's just an average player. So I'm going to give NWI a yellow grade here. Again, not elite, not very good, not good, but just an average NFL starter. All right. And I think that's great news for the Tennessee Titans that they have the depth that they have at wide receiver now. So we're going to talk about the trenches. We got to talk about tight end as well. I'm going to get into all of that. Before I do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Look, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. from superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits to LED headlights and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Titans fans, let's continue today's roster talent breakdown on the Locked On Titans podcast. We've gone through Will Levis and the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers. Now I want to flip to the trenches. We're going to talk about tight end, offensive line, defensive line as well. Before we get into it, thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first to listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Again, next week is AFC South week. I'm going to break down the division rivals. I'm going to have the AFC South other hosts come on and give a little synopsis on what they thought of the offseason for their teams that they cover. It's going to be very informative, and I can't wait to bring it all to you guys. But with that being said, let's dive back in to our roster analysis here. Okay, we're finishing up the offensive side of the ball. And if you're watching on YouTube, of course, you can kind of see the graph and the colors and all of that. Check that out if you're a podcast folk. If not, I'm still explaining everything, so you're getting the full picture. Don't worry about that. But, of course, as I mentioned, J.C. Latham, at this stage, it would be irresponsible to make a guess on what he is. So I'm going with a purple player. He's just a rookie. We don't know. We simply do not know what kind of player that J.C. Latham is going to be. I have high hopes that he can be a green player, good early on. He could eventually be a red player. He could eventually be a blue player, a blue chip player is what you got to hope from J.C. Latham. But early on, we just simply don't know what we're going to get from the rookie. So you can't really put him anywhere. Now with Peter Skoronski, to me, green player. We saw it last year too. At the end of the season, especially that game against Jacksonville, I broke it down on my film channel at Tic Tac Titans here on YouTube. Skoronski was just destroying the Jags in Week 18. And some of the flashes that we saw, Week 1 of the season, he was a top 10 graded offensive lineman in the NFL against the Saints. Top 10 in the NFL. Peter Skoronski is a good player. All right. He had the appendectomy in the middle of the season. He had some bad performances, lost weight. He's talked about it as well. He didn't want to make excuses for himself. But losing 20 pounds in the middle of the season as an NFL offensive lineman with an emergency surgery, I mean, that'll get you. That'll get you for sure. So I'm going with a green player for Peter Skoronski. He is good. Now, with Cushenberry, to me, Cushenberry is a red chip player. Cushenberry is one of the top 10 centers in the NFL, probably top 8 centers in the NFL. Cushenberry is excellent. And I think when we talked yesterday about how the Titans offensive line got a top 10 projection from Mike Clay of ESPN, this is why. Because Peter Skoronski is a good player and Cushenberry is a very good player. And J.C. Latham will probably be in one of those areas by the time that we actually get to see him play. So with those three players, the Titans are in a very good spot on the left side of the offensive line. It's when you get to right guard that you worry. You know what I mean? Like, I know that we're very excited for what Sadiq Charles can be here. But at the end of the day, I think that Sadiq Charles is just an average level player. He's just an average starter. You could replace him with a bunch of different guys around the NFL. Like, he's just not special in any way. He's not good. He's not very good. He's just been average so far in his career. There's no way to look at Sadiq Charles and think that he's anything more than a yellow player. He's just average at the end of the day. Could he be better under Bill Callahan in a system that fits him after 4 years of playing with a better mindset? maybe so. But right now, you can't say anything more than he's just an average. Again, the term that has been a term in the NFL for a long time is JAG, just another guy. And Sadiq Charles is just another guy as things stand. Now, for Nicholas Petit-Ferrer, I may be too low, but he's a backup to me. He is a career backup, in my opinion. Maybe, again, the Bill Callahan bump is hard to project. How much better are these guys going to be under Bill Callahan compared to what they were before? I mean, Jason Hotelling, Bill Callahan, it's not a very good comparison. So NPF certainly could get a lot better. But from what we've seen from him so far, his rookie year and then the short period that he played last year, he looked like a backup level player to me. And I think that's why the Titans go out and they get a Jerron Christian and they get a Leroy Watson, because you don't know. You just don't know. So that's where I'm putting NPF for right now. As for the backups, I threw Cole Spencer in as the backup at left guard just to have 5 different players. I mean, at this point, obviously, he is a purple player. We have no idea what Cole Spencer is going to be. I'm high on him as one of the undrafted free agents for the Titans, but I mean, how could you say anything definitively? The odds are that he's a white player, backup, practice squad level player. Daniel Brunskill, though, I think that Brunskill is also an average level player. I think that, Brunskill maybe doesn't fit the Tennessee Titans currently as well as he did last year, which is why Sadiq Charles has kind of taken over. But, Brunskill is an average level starter in the NFL, and a bunch of teams would take him. Same thing with Dylan Radins. I think that Dylan Radins is just an average level starter. You could have Dylan Radins as your starting right guard on another team. I honestly think the Titans should consider maybe a trade for one of those 2 players if they really think Sadiq Charles is going to be the starter at right guard. You have 3 people who could play right guard who I think are just average NFL starters, 5th best offensive lineman on a starting offensive line. You want to have depth, and Brunskill has been playing at backup center, which is where I have him on my depth chart thing here. But, I mean, you could find another backup center. You know what I mean? And if you could get something out of one of those guys before the season, that would be very helpful. But having that depth could be something that the Titans just really are interested in. So makes sense if they just keep them around. But as for Leroy Watson and Jerron Christian, like, both of these guys are backups. You could maybe try to talk yourself into one of them turning into a starter with the Bill Callahan tutelage. Of course, the Bill Callahan bump, like I talked about. How much is that going to account for? It's very hard to tell right now, but it's pretty obvious to me that both Christian and Watson are just backup level players who are maybe practice squad level players. As for tight end, right now we're high on Josh Wiley and want to see what he can do, but Wiley is just a backup level player right now. Based on last year, what we saw from Wiley, what we didn't see from Wiley, you can't say anything other. And for me, Chikakonkwo is just an average level player right now. He's just not the worst tight end in the NFL. I think he's one of the top 32 tight ends in the NFL. Solid, average player. Could replace him with a bunch of other tight ends in the NFL and probably get similar production. Maybe not the same skill set, but similar production and talent level. So that's where I'm at on the entire offense. A lot of average starters, some good players as well. 3 very good players in Ridley, Cushenberry, and Hopkins. And then, of course, a lot of it will have to do with where Latham ends up and where Levis goes eventually. So I have 4 good players on the offense in Pollard and Spears, Skoronski and Boyd. 3 very good players in Ridley, Cushenberry, and Hopkins. And then a lot of average players as well, which includes Will Levis. But again, this isn't where these guys are going to stay. Some of these players, this is just who they are. But I think a lot of these young players could get even better. Skoronski could go red. Levis could go green or red. Burks could take a step up to yellow, which would be very helpful. Okonkwo or Wiley could ascend to be a yellow or a green, depending on who you're looking at. Like, I think that's all a possibility. So we're going to look at the defensive side of the ball now. I'm going to switch over here to the defense, and we're really going to talk about the defensive line, the 3 spots on the defensive line. You have Jeffrey Simmons. Look, Jeffrey Simmons is an elite player. Okay. No doubt about it in my mind. He is an elite player. The Titans need him to be an elite player. Sweat, of course, is a purple player. I can't tell you what he's going to be, good or bad. It would be irresponsible to say either because we don't know. And Sebastian Joseph Day is just an average starter. He's just an average player. You could replace him with other guys around the NFL. The real problem comes in that all three of the backups, Coburn, McClendon, like I have this category as backup practice squad, which could mean either. But all of these guys are practice squad players, in my opinion. Marlon Davidson, Keandre Coburn. You could throw Quentin Bohanna in there if you want to go three deep. TK McClendon. These are guys who are fighting for a roster spot, and the Titans are relying on them to be critical backups. That's dangerous to me. That's a dangerous game to play. So Simmons is elite. Sweat is an unknown rookie. Sebastian Joseph Day is just an average starter that's replacement level. But everybody behind him is practice squad, and that's why I talked about bringing in Breland Speaks and maybe looking at bringing in some more interior defensive linemen when cuts happen, because I just really think the Titans' defensive line depth is not very good. But we're going to talk edge rusher. We're going to talk cornerback, safety, linebacker, all of that. Before we get into it, though, do want to let you guys know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's called Locked On Sports Today. You get local coverage from Locked On hosts like me. You get national shows, all kinds of information. And again, it's 24/7. It's on YouTube. It's on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Make sure that you guys check out Locked On Sports Today. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We are looking at the talent level of the top two players at each position for the Tennessee Titans. We've talked offense. We've talked the defensive line. Now I want to cap off the defense. Let me know your grades down below, what color grades you would assign to all of these players. We're going to dive back in here because we do have a lot to discuss. Before we do, though, another reminder, AFC South week is next week. Hope you guys enjoy that. I think it's going to be a great look at the Titans division rivals. I'm going to get the Locked On hosts from those shows to give us their opinions as well. So very excited to dive into all of that with you guys. But finishing off here, the defensive side of the ball. We talked about the D-line already. Let's go to edge. All right. Harold Landry, to me, is a good player. He is a green player. That's what I'm going to give him. And of course, he could go up to a red, in my opinion. I think that Landry could be a red player with a full season of health, get to 13, 15 sacks. He could get there. But right now, I see Harold Landry as a 10 to 12 sack guy who can drop into coverage. He's just a very, very good starter. He's better than average, not quite very good, not quite an A plus level player, elite, very good. But he's just a good starter, a very reliable player at the end of the day. So I really like Harold Landry. I've always been a big fan of Harold Landry. He's a good player. Okay. That's important. Now, Arden Key to me is just an average player. Like, if you put him in the right role, I think he can do better for you. Like, he could be a big factor, But the problem is I don't think he's a starter. I don't think he's a good starter. He's just an average starter. You could replace him with other players and, probably get similar results if you want him as a starter. I think Arden Key needs to be a third rusher. I've talked about this a ton. I think that Brian Callahan made a mistake, honestly, early in the season and referred to him as a rotational player. But I think it's the truth. Same thing with Rashad Weaver. I know that this may be a tad controversial, but I think that Rashad Weaver is an average level player. I don't think that he was given enough opportunity last year. Maybe some of that had to do with him not being in good enough shape. We see him slim down this year, looks more explosive. So I'm sure behind the scenes, Rashad Weaver has his own reasons for not being what we thought he might be or being better. But I honestly think that Rashad Weaver is just an average player. I think he could, at his best, be a starter for a team as part of a rotation on the edge. And then you look at Caleb Murphy, who I guess I'm giving the fourth edge spot to right now. I mean, that's why I want the Titans to bring in Breland Speaks. Caleb Murphy is just a backup at best, practice squad level, probably, if we're honest. So, again, that's why I'm worried about the pass rush and the front of the Titans. Because you have Jeffrey Simmons, you have Harold Landry, but outside of that, it's just a bunch of average or worse. And that's not quite good enough when you got to rotate your defensive line and keep people healthy. Okay, moving to linebacker, though. To me, maybe I was a little harsh on Jack Gibbons earlier this week. I can admit that. I think he's probably just an average level starter. I think Titans fans dislike Jack Gibbons more than others. Cody Alexander does Match Quarters, really smart football guy. I subscribe to his newsletter. He honestly likes Jack Gibbons. He thinks that he's an average starting linebacker. And looking at some of the data that he's put together, some of the metrics that he has, which I put out on my Twitter at Tic Tac Titans, I'd have to say that's right. So I would move Jack Gibbons to a C level player. He's just an average player. I think, again, he's a bit underrated by Titans fans because we've seen the bad, but there's not a good comparison. A lot of Titans fans just watch Titans games, so they don't have a good frame of comparison. So I'll give Jack Gibbons average. You could replace him with a lot of other linebackers in the NFL and get similar results. He is an average level starter, a Jack. This may be a little controversial. I think Kenneth Murray is a backup. I do not like Kenneth Murray. I do not like that signing. I am hoping that one of Cedric Gray or Otis Reese overtake him. And I'm going to do something I haven't done yet. I'm going to take a second-year player and put him in the purple category as just an unknown, basically a rookie grade. We just simply don't know what we're going to get from Otis Reese. Spent a lot of the time with the practice squad, didn't get a lot of snaps last year, got a little bit of work at the end of the year, and it showed some flashes of decency, but we just simply don't know. You know, it's not like Peter Skoronski, where we got to see a ton of him as a player. You know what I mean? It's not quite that level of play. We got to see a ton of Nicholas Petit-Ferrer in his rookie year and a little bit last year. So Otis Reese is the only guy that I think kind of fits that mold at the end of the day. Moving over to cornerback. This is where things get really exciting. Another blue. L'Jarius Sneed is a blue player. He is elite. An elite cornerback. So the only two elite players that the Titans have are both on defense. It's Jeffrey Simmons and L'Jarius Sneed. They're the best two players on the team. Okay, so I love seeing that. The Titans need to build on that, but the good news is next year's draft is very good on defense. Okay, now for Roger McCreary, again, this may be a little controversial. I don't care. He is a very good player. I have Roger McCreary as a very good player, an A-level player. He's underrated, even by some Titans fans. Like, he's one of the top 10, maybe top 5 slot cornerbacks in the entire NFL. Very good player in Roger McCreary. And then for Cheeto Awuzie, I would give him a good. He's a good player. He's not very good. He could be very good. He was very good for the Bengals during their run, but he's had some injuries. He's gotten a little older, but I think he's just a good player. A good player. Now, with Jarvis Brownlee Jr., we can't know. That has to be a purple. I think that Brownlee is going to be, I think he's going to be a good player. I really do. But got to be fair. It's hard to know. With Eric Garror and Trey Avery, they are white players to me. They are backups. They are practice squad level players. Like, I would hope that through time, the Titans can get more talent in there. Maybe Caleb Farley shows up. That would be great. I didn't even put Caleb Farley on here because I don't think he's making the roster. At the end of the day, if I'm going too deep at every position, I just can't put Caleb Farley on there over Trey Avery, over Eric Garror in the slot, over Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I just can't do that. Okay. So Garror, Avery, and I would put Farley in that too if you had to rank them. Backups, practice squad level. Would hope the Titans can build more depth there over time. Moving to safety. This is where things are worrisome. Amani Hooker, good player. He is a good player. I'm not going to say very good, but I think he is a good player. All right, B+ level safety. You're not just going to be able to rotate a bunch of safeties in there from around the NFL and get the same level of play. Healthy Amani Hooker is a very good player. All right. Now, here's the problem. I think that Elijah Molden, Mike Brown, I guess Matthew Jackson, the Titans have just some terrible, terrible depth at safety. They're all backups to practice squad level. I think Mike Brown and Elijah Molden are both backups in the NFL. I think Matthew Jackson is a practice squad player. And we talked about this yesterday when we talked about Marcus May being off the board, how important it was for the Tennessee Titans to go out and get Justin Simmons. Like, they need to go out and get another starting safety. Now, quickly, I'll do special teams. I think that Nick Folk is a good player. Good. Not very good. Not elite. Good. I think that Morgan Cox is elite. I'll throw another blue on there. He is an elite long snapper. Okay. When do you hear anything about Morgan Cox? Never. That means he's doing a great job. And then Stoney, I know he is hurt right now, but I think he's also an elite player. Ryan Stonehouse, when healthy, is an elite all-pro level punter. One of the top 2-3 punters in the entire NFL. So there's the defense. There's the offense. Very curious to hear what you guys have to say down below, what you think of these rankings. Again, it was roster week this week. I know we're in a little bit of the dead period, but I had a lot of fun going through the talent levels, the grades, what we think of these players, the recent news, all that. Let me know your thoughts down below. Again, next week is AFC South week. Very excited to dive into that as well. But that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.